So very happy to have another one of our friends at the Canadian Constitution Foundation here, along with one of their clients, to talk about their story, similar as we did a few years ago with Michael Schmidt. I think a lot of you know Karen Selleck, a longtime attendee and speaker at the Liberty Summer Seminar, and I'm going to pass it over to Karen to introduce Montana Jones and talk a little bit about her case.
Montana wasn't here last night. She's the lady standing over there in the orange top. Hello. She wasn't here last night and so didn't get the opportunity to hear Jeffrey Tucker in his very inspiring talk about how eventually the world of ideas is going to do an end run around the state. And so I was very pleased and inspired to hear about, some optimism about how we are going to eventually, how the state is powerless, how we're going to do an end run around it. But meanwhile, there are people who are currently living in the material world, dealing with physical objects, and the state is doing its utmost to hammer them into the ground, and to control them and regulate them in every manner. So even though there may be some good reason to be optimistic about the future, there are some people who are having serious problems with the state right now. And my organization, the Canadian Constitution Foundation, exists here in Canada to try to fight that. Some of you may recall that a few years ago, the Jaworskis had a problem here with the state coming in and wanting to close down the Liberty Summer Seminar. And we were able to get them to back off. So that's the sort of thing that we do. They've been raising havoc with farmers of various types in all of Ontario. Montana is one example. And so she's going to tell you today her story about what has happened to her, what they have been doing to her and trying to do to her. She's going to show a video, I think, first, and then when she's done, I may talk about some of the legal ramifications, and then we're quite open to answering questions, because I think she's got a really interesting story, and the implications of what the state is trying to do to Montana and to other farmers like her, to people who are producing, a very basic product like our food. That it's dismaying, to say the least. So we're open to questions, but I just want you to be aware that Montana is facing criminal charges right now. And so for various reasons, legal reasons and strategic reasons, we may not be prepared to answer all of your questions, because we fully expect that when the video of this talk is posted on the internet, as I gather it will be at some point, that the prosecutors are probably going to have a look and listen to what she had to say and what I had to say, and we don't want to give anything to them that they wouldn't otherwise have. So for those reasons, we might not be able to answer all of your questions.
Hi, I'm Montana Jones. The video you just saw was a video that I posted on a crowd funding platform website a couple of months ago to try and raise funds for the situation I was in. So I probably should have played it last, because it's hard for me to watch that. It was a very successful campaign, though, because I was facing foreclosure, and now I've had a bit of a reprieve, thanks to thousands of people that have been so supportive around the world. But I'll start back at the beginning. Apparently, as I said in the video, CFIA considers me farmed and dangerous. CFIA is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. But I'm not a criminal. I'm just a farmer and a shepherd who's been raising and conserving rare breed Shropshire sheep for the last 13 years, and farming various other heritage breeds for the last 30. I ran a meat CSA, organic vegetable CSA, went to market. So how is it that the Canadian Food Inspection Agency have charged myself and raw milk activist farmer Michael Schmidt and 2 others with 9 criminal charges, including conspiracy and obstruction? As I said in the video, we're facing over $100,000 in legal fees. Karen and the Canadian Constitution Foundation have been wonderfully supportive. I think Karen knows more about sheep and sheep diseases than any other legal counsel that I know. And as a result, the CFIA actually is now trying to remove Karen and Sean Buckley from BC, who is also part of our legal team, saying that they are a conflict of interest. So we're now having to go to a judicial pretrial next month before this trial even begins. They're trying to remove them. They don't want us to have our legal representative of choice. This all started, I'm allegedly I'm being charged allegedly, as I see it, for trying to save Canada's heritage sheep and preserve our country's agricultural biodiversity. In the last 10 years alone, there's 60 breeds of cattle and goats and pigs, horses and poultry that have become extinct. And heritage, some people say, well, like what? What's the big deal about heritage breeds? But they are to the barnyard what non-GMO seeds are to the garden. They're tasty and traditional, hardy, disease-resistant, and they grow really well on grass pasture, so there's no grain required. I think many people don't realize that 90% of all the food that we consume comes from only 8 animal breeds. Many of those are unable to reproduce on their own and rely on antibiotics and hormones and grain to be quickly fattened up. And it's just not natural, but heritage breeds are, and that's what I raise. Or did raise, up until CFIA swooped down on my little farmstead about 3 years ago and declared that a ewe that I sold many, many years ago had tested positive for a sheep disease called scrapie. It's not a human health risk. Just, in case you're wondering if they had good reason, they didn't. My flock had never had a single sign or symptom, and CFIA agreed that the sheep that was found positive in Alberta, they agreed that it could have been infected after it left my farm. So they assured me at the time that I needn't worry and that they wouldn't be killing my flock and that they were just there to find the source of this infection out in Alberta. So they did live tests. And now the live tests are 88% accuracy, which is pretty high rate of accuracy. All those tests came back negative. And I had hoped that would be the end of it, but it was not. CFIA issued an order to kill them all anyway, just in case. Now, this is a rare breed with genetics that I think there were less, when I first got interested in preserving their genetics about 12, 13 years ago, there were less than 100 in Canada. And I had been successful in building that and selling live breeding stock to other small homesteaders that wanted to increase the genetic base. So it was especially horrific to me to hear that they were going to wipe out 13 years of my work and all these genetics. Like these bloodlines go back to the early 1900s, and I gave them I tried to reason with them, I plead with them, and gave them I think it was a 9-point proposal where I offered to do cartwheels. I offered to keep them all in quarantine so that they could keep testing them as they died naturally. They test their brain obex after they're dead to see if scrapie is present. Now, in fact, that test isn't even 100% accurate. It falls somewhere between the 88% and 100. I said, well, can't you test them again? And I said, each time you test them, with the live test, then they would, the accuracy rate would climb from 88%. They wouldn't do that. I offered to, keep them in quarantine for 5 years, and I would figure out a way where they could monitor them and just keep tabs and determine if they did indeed have them. No, they wouldn't even respond to those requests. So they issued this order to kill them anyway. And I don't know if any of you have heard of activist farmer, he's an American, Joel Salatin. He was on side, he pleaded to them, the president of the Rare Breed Survival Trust in England, where they support this breed very much. He was sending letters. So Agriculture Minister Jerry Ritz ignored all of them, and he's still ignoring almost 7,000 petition signatures that I have on change.org. So the CFIA destroyed all the ewes. They were majority of them were pregnant. They wouldn't wait. They killed them, and basically to find out if they were healthy, and they were, and now they are dead. So they were killing small groups of them, and then they'd issued an order for the remaining ones of the genotype they wanted on my farm, and we were holding a rally that day in protest. They'd had me dig this, hire an excavator and dig this, 20-foot pit to bury them in at the top of my hill. When that day came, people arrived for the rally, CFI showed up, police were already there, and the sheep were gone. In that time, there are details. There's lots I can answer about it, and there's lots I can't answer questions about. But the gist of it is based on that they. Now, in that time, they did find the sheep at a North Ontario farm several months later. They proceeded to kill them, that group as well. They were all negative. A woman that I'd sold, a British woman that I'd sold some to years before, she heard about this story, and I just wish so much she had spoken with me and I could have assured her. But so she called CFI and said, I have some of her sheep, maybe they're all infected with scrapie. So off they trot down to the Niagara region and killed 9 of her ewes, all of which were negative. Even more bloodlines. I have a couple out there still, but not very many. So much money on a sheep disease that affects just a handful of sheep in Canada every year and does not even affect human health. So CFI will tell you that I think they posted on their different press releases that it's in Canada's best interest to increase resistance to scrapie so that it doesn't become a trade barrier in the future. So basically, because the States has a similar policy, they want to match so that the lamb producers of Canada can do cross-border trading. But I'm not a part. I have this small little homestead. I'm just growing vegetables, and I'm not a big ag lamb producer. So it just seems so heavy-handed to me. And sad too for me to have spent so many years on it and realize that the Department of Agriculture, the Canada rare genetics I was saving. I thought I was doing Canada a favor and the agriculture, but that doesn't mean a whole lot to the Department of Agriculture, our government. The money, I guess, for the cross-border trading or to be able to make that claim means more. And I'm not against eradicating scrapie. I'm behind that. I just think their draconian measures are, especially as it applies to these rare genetics, are. I'm just stymied. I still don't have my. I still don't fully understand. I won't fully understand. The CFI is not very happy with me for going public with this. I did warn them that I was going to, and I think their comment was, well, you're not the first producer to be unhappy with this, and you won't be the last. I had another farmer when the news first broke in my area that to see if I was going to kill my flock. Another farmer come and visit me, and successful farmer in our area, chicken farmer, and he used to have cattle apparently, and he came, as did many others, and say, I was advised to roll over, let the CFIA kill my sheep, take their money because they claimed that they would give compensation for all of my sheep, and then move on, get on with my life, go find something else to do. But I didn't, because their policy. This farmer that had come to see me, he had had a similar experience with them, with the government years, like decades ago, with cattle, and I think it was tuberculosis in his case, and they paid him off, and he started over in chickens or something. This to my mind was quite different because of the rare genetics. I didn't feel that I was a threat, to the industry, and I just wanted a more level-headed approach to what. I wanted to find out if there was indeed scrapie on my property, but from everything I could ascertain, there wasn't. They were wrong, and but now that I'd gone public with it, they were not backing down. I decided not to. I didn't really decide. It was just like an innate. It was wrong to kill endangered livestock. So. For them to eradicate the genetics and traditional blood types of a heritage breed to the exclusion of one preferred by the government for economic reasons is the same as genetically modifying a seed. And I realize this is not just now, I realize it's not just about the sheep or what they did to me or are doing to me, but it's about a misuse of government power, and we've handed that over to them. Our government should be spending our dollars on saving seeds and breeds, not killing them off. I felt that way since this all started, but holding up this, this sword for several years has a way of wearing one down, and if it weren't for the support of thousands of people helping me tremendously through this thing, in agreement, it's been very helpful. That and Karen Selleck's and Canadian Constitution Foundation's help has been huge. I can tell you that I never ever thought that by creating this quiet little place in the country to live and work hard and care for animals and grow good food to sell at market. I never thought that was particularly dangerous path to go down. It seems so nonsensical, and a lot of people say, like, what? That you're charged? You have 9 criminal charges for what? For trying to for standing up for sheep. So it seems like a really fantastic story, unbelievable story. I'm hearing more and more about it in the States. There's and here too, but there's one, I don't know if anybody here has heard about it. There's a farmer named Mark Baker. He has heritage pigs, and they have descended on him as well, saying that they're wild boars and that you can't raise wild boars. They have to be pink, and they have to be indoors, and they have to be in crates, and you can't raise animals naturally. So he's fighting a lot of the same issues. One of my issues with this is that CFI. My biggest one is that they've changed my life, and I didn't sign up for this, but I'm in it, so I'm kind of moving forward through it, and we'll just keep trying to spread word about what's happened. I'm also reminded, there are despite my hardship through this, there are far, far, far worse things in the world that can happen, and that are happening to other people all over the world. With CFIA, I mean, they've altered my course, but I can't. They can't really hurt me much more than they already have. They're trying to pull me down this path of irrational action and futility. And the futility is the hardest part for me, because they've destroyed this joy I have found in my sheep and in indeed maybe my whole relationship with my farm and farming. But I'm hoping that I just need some time to heal that. And I realize too, I'm trying to make sense of all of this with that I need to stop trying to make sense of it, because in their world, it doesn't make any sense. And it's their world and not mine. So I need to focus on that. And what keeps me going is knowing that they're wrong, and the need to change that, to change so many of their draconian policies. I'll let Karen talk a little bit about the legal implications, and then we could both answer questions afterwards if anyone has any. Thanks very much.
I just want to fill in some of the gaps that seemed apparent as I heard Montana talk. And first of all, one of the things she mentioned is that there could be legal fees as high as $100,000, and I just want to clarify that the Canadian Constitution Foundation doesn't charge our clients legal fees. The work that we do with our in-house lawyers is all done pro bono, but this is something beyond anything that I've ever handled, and so we have had to look outside for additional counsel to assist Montana. And there's a lawyer named Sean Buckley in British Columbia who has fought cases against Health Canada in the past, and fought cases which are both criminal and constitutional, which is what this one is, because we're actually bringing a constitutional challenge to the Health of Animals Act, which is the legislation that she's charged under. And Sean has experience in this, and even though he's giving us a very special rate for his services, he contemplates that it could well be $100,000 in legal fees by the time we're done with the kind of huge case that they're mounting against us. And just another thing that occurs to me with regard to that huge case that they're mounting against us is that when I go to court, Montana and I go by ourselves, and they bring us the disclosure documents in bankers' boxes. And so I go to court and get several bankers' boxes full of documents, which it took 6 people on their side to bring to court. I take them home by myself in my car, but it took 6 people to come to court, 2 lawyers, somebody else from the law firm who may be the third person, may be a lawyer, maybe a paralegal, I'm not sure, and 3 other people just to carry the boxes of documents that they then give me. So, I mean, being involved in this case has brought home to me the incredible waste that our bureaucracy engages in. Not only do I see it in court, but Montana has seen it.
My disclosure, when I put it on my desk, all the binders together is just over 4 feet high.
Yeah,
but I have to read before the trial.
That's just repeating what she said for the video. She talks about 4 feet high documents of disclosure, but that wasn't the thing that I had in mind. The time I was thinking of was the time that they sent the vet to take blood tests from all your sheep, which you would think that they could manage with one vet, but eventually they had 6 vets there, and they still couldn't get it all done, and they had to call in a 7th vet from some other office in order to take blood samples from these sheep. Well, these guys are vets. What the heck do they do with their time if they don't know how to take blood samples from sheep? And if they don't know how to take blood samples from sheep, maybe they are in the wrong job, and maybe they shouldn't be doing this. But I just want to talk a little bit about this illness called scrapie. Scrapie is not a new disease. Scrapie has been known, if you look back in English literature, for about 280 years. If you look back, there's references to this disease of sheep called scrapie from 280 years ago. But the federal government, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, has started this scrapie eradication program in 2007. So for like 270 odd years, it was okay for people to deal with scrapie on their own, and then suddenly the government said, oh no, we have to have a scrapie eradication program. Well, in my view, what actually happened was the scrapie eradication program grew out of the mad cow scare, because both scrapie and mad cow are prion diseases that are similar in nature, but mad cow can affect humans and scrapie can't. But because of mad cow, the CFIA had hired a whole bunch of scrapie experts who, after the mad cow disease problem was ended, they had no jobs anymore. They had nothing further to do at the CFIA. So the scrapie eradication program got started so that these people would continue to have jobs in the CFIA. The CFIA has 7,500 people working for it. 7,500 bureaucrats work for the CFIA, and if they're all as efficient as the ones that Montana has seen in action, that's probably at least 7 times as many as they need to actually get the job done, assuming that you think that there is a job that they should be doing anyhow. And of course, that's another whole question as to whether we need the state to guarantee the safety of our food supply. One of the implications that probably don't occur to many people unless they're interested in economics, as I am, but I'm sure that this group will understand what I'm saying, is that the whole scrapie eradication program is actually a state-run health insurance program for sheep. So what they do is they come to farmers and they say, if we find this illness on your farm, don't worry, we will pay you compensation for the sheep that we destroy, and therefore you're not out of pocket. Just let us destroy your sheep, we'll pay you compensation. The compensation, of course, comes out of the taxpayers' pockets. Taxpayers, did you know that you're running in addition to our health insurance program for humans, did you know that you're also running a health insurance program for sheep? Probably not, but we are. And of course, the problem here is that unless the farmer is compliant, it's completely within the discretion of the government as to whether they do pay the compensation or not. And since Montana, in addition to the criminal charges that they brought, they didn't. There was always the concern that that because she was resisting for like a year and a half or 2.5, I guess it was more like 2 years and 4 months before the sheep actually went missing. There was always some concern that just her resistance to them and her continual saying, well, I'm going to get publicity for what you're doing, and all of that could have deprived her of her compensation in any event. The other really interesting thing that I learned when I was researching all about scrapie is that as a result of the government's scrapie eradication program, which consists of, if we suspect, and they don't even have to have a reasonable grounds for suspicion, the legislation just says if they suspect that this disease exists, they can issue these destruction orders for the animals. So if they suspect that, they just destroy all the animals who they consider to be susceptible to the illness, and then no skin off anybody's nose as far as the CFIA is concerned. They go to taxpayer coffers, pay the farmers out. Some of the farmers are happy to be paid out, but the actual impact that this has, as I discovered when I was researching this, is that this government program crowds out other ways of dealing with scrapie. So, for instance, I discovered when researching this that there have been at least 3 other scientists working on their own who were working on different types of tests that could be used to determine whether or not sheep had scrapie without actually killing them to examine their obex. There was one firm that was working on blood tests. There was another guy who had discovered that if you shine fluorescent light into the eyes of the sheep that you're trying to test, you get different results if there was scrapie in the obex than if there wasn't scrapie in the obex. And there was another guy who was working on some method of testing using sound waves. And I contacted various people who were working on these different methods of testing for scrapie and said, well, can't you present this to the government? Can't you get these guys to use your tests instead of just saying, no, we're just going to go in and kill them and make the taxpayers pay for it? And all of them uniformly said, well, no, as a result of the scrapie eradication program, there's no interest in anybody pursuing my alternative testing method. And so farmers aren't interested in funding this. These other, less destructive, less intrusive, and, less oppressive methods of testing for scrapie are not available to farmers because of the destruction program that the federal government runs. Another point that I wanted to add to what Montana said, just so that it's clear, they always told her, and she even has a tape recorded discussion that she had when, 6 of them came to your farm? 5 or 6 of them came to talk to her about this in November 2011 and to tell her what they were going to do to her animals. And they assured her that the only way that you could really tell whether or not a sheep was infected was to kill it and to examine the obex, part of the brain. But I found a couple of studies, one that had been done on white-tailed deer, which are subject to a similar wasting disease, and one that had actually been done on sheep in Europe, where they did kill large numbers of infected sheep and examine all the different sites in the body, because first it invades the lymphatic system before it gets to the brain. They examined all the different sites in the body where they could find a scrapie, and they found that in many cases, the obex would not show scrapie, but there was other parts of the animal where it would. So even though they said to her, the only way we can find out is to kill it and look at the brain, that wasn't even true. And even if they did kill, all the sheep that they suspect and look at the brains, they still might be allowing scrapie to go undetected. So, you really have to question the whole motive behind this. Whether it is, as I suspect, mostly a make-work project for a bunch of bureaucrats, and whether it's appropriate for Canadian taxpayers to be running a health insurance program for sheep, or whether it's even appropriate for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to be, involved in this in the first place. I think it's pretty clear that the reason that food producers don't poison their clients is because, number one, they would be sued. Number two, they wouldn't get liability insurance. Number three, it's not a good way to get repeat business. So I think the marketplace really is what takes care of making sure that people don't sell poisonous food. And I think the government's role in it, although most consumers think that that's what's protecting them, that isn't really what's protecting them. Okay, those are the points that I really wanted to cover. But questions?
Yeah, can you just I didn't understand the nature of the criminal charges. So I don't know if you can say what exactly led to a criminal charge.
Montana's facing additional criminal. Yeah, Montana's facing additional criminal charges that don't pertain to the disappearance of the sheep. She's facing disobeying an inspector is essentially the nature of the charges. But there are 4 people who are facing charges because on the morning when the CFIA was supposed to come and pick them all up, the sheep were no longer in the barn, and a note was in the barn that said something like, "We have taken these sheep into protective custody until proof of disease can be produced." And it was signed by a hitherto unheard of group called the Farmers Peace Corps. And so, the CFIA suspects that Montana may be a part of the Farmers Peace Corps, and the other 3 people who have been charged are suspected to be part of the Farmers Peace Corps. So that's the criminal charges.
At the beginning, Montana said that the CFI is trying to remove you as a lawyer due to conflict of interest. What's that? Can we know the nature of that conflict of interest?
No. They're trying to remove me for 2 reasons, and they're trying to remove Sean Buckley for 1 reason. So the 2 reasons that they're trying to remove me are, first of all, that I was actually present at the farm on the morning when the CFIA was supposed to come and kill the sheep. Because as Montana said, there was a rally on the farm that morning. That was planned well in advance. We put out notices saying, "Come and protest peacefully." The CFIA are coming to take the sheep and kill them this day. We want a peaceful protest, and anybody who obstructs the CFIA will be subject to a possible $250,000 in fines and 2 years in jail. So it was certainly not our intention to have people obstruct the CFIA. But I was scheduled to be one of the speakers at the rally, and when I arrived to speak at this rally, lo and behold, I was told that the sheep were no longer there, which did not please me. But the CFIA lawyers say that they are going to call me as a witness, and I have no idea what they are going to ask me. I have consistently refused to speak to their investigator. I've told many people the same thing that I've told people today. But I don't know what they would ask me in court that they think could possibly pertain to, gaining a conviction against the people they've charged. But that's the reason, and that will be heard in court on September 17th and 18th. The second reason that they want to remove me is because they allege that there is a conflict of interest, since I and Sean Buckley, and this is why they're trying to remove both me and Sean. They say that we both have the same conflict of interest because we are actually representing two accused. We are representing Montana, and we're also representing the other accused, whom some of you know, Michael Schmidt, who is the raw milk producer, who is a client of mine for other reasons. And whenever two people are co-accused and they retain the same counsel, there's always the potential that one of them might want to make a deal with the prosecutors and say, "I'll squeal on the other person, and I'll get myself off the hook by squealing on the other person." So that's one of the ways in which co-accused might have conflicts of interest. Co-accused can also sometimes have conflicts of interest if they're going to testify and something that they say or something they're cross-examined on could conceivably harm the interests of the other defendants. So they're saying that because we are representing two defendants, we have these potential conflicts of interest which are so huge that they can't be overcome. But we don't agree with that, and we'll be defending that.
I wanted to know if they served you guys with a warrant for the specific sheep that they were going to take away, and warrant to come onto your property with specific charges, or are they like a bylaw bully in that they're not for some reason bound by the same laws as say police officers?
Montana certainly knew that that this was coming down the pipe. Her farm was quarantined in the beginning of 2010, and finally in March of 2013, about I think a week before, or maybe 10 days before they actually intended to carry out the destruction order, they served her with something called a destruction order that said, on April the 2nd. We're going to come and take the sheep. Or actually they said, you have to surrender the sheep for destruction. Otherwise, if you don't do it that day, then we're going to destroy the sheep. So yeah, she was served with that notice. There's something I wanted to...
I was just going to add, there was another group before that group that they wanted to kill, and they served me with a destruction order for that group. It was a group of 9, I believe. They were also all negative. And I did later, whether it was before or later, also receive, when they did arrive at 7 in the morning with, I think it was over 20 OPP and CFIA officials were there, and me. And they descended on the farm with a search warrant, took my computers, took pretty much everything, electronic, and they were there about 12 and a half hours. So
that was after.
That was after
after the sheep had disappeared. That was when they began to suspect, and decided that they would, get all the records and computers and stuff. Your question did trigger another thought, but I forgot. Maybe come back to me. Something else I wanted to add.
You can take the mic. Karen, it's pretty clear that from the point of view of these bureaucrats, they're allowed to presume guilt across the board. I mean, you have to prove innocence. That's a reversal of a fundamental constitutional protection. The people who created these laws, has it been pointed out to them that that's having this effect, and do they give a damn about that? I'm sure the answer is no, but
Jen, keep the mic because I just want to clarify. You say presume guilt. Presume guilt of the sheep?
no, on the
Presume guilt of the
guilt on the part of Montana Jones and all the other people who are implicated in this.
I wouldn't say I don't agree. I'm not sure why you draw that inference. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I don't necessarily agree that they're presuming her guilt. They still will have to face the same criminal standards of proof beyond reasonable doubt, and they will have to face the constitutional challenge we're bringing as well, which is that because she and the other accused are facing the potential of going to jail for many years, their liberty is at stake, and so under Section 7 of the Constitution, they can't be deprived of their liberty without, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. And we say that the principles of fundamental justice have not been abided by here. I mean, the arbitrariness of the decision to kill the flock when from all appearances they were healthy. That's that's just quite unjustified, we think.
That's what I meant by a presumption of guilt.
I think they presume I'm guilty. I had one CFIA inspector at my door while I was saying, "Don't you guys use the telephone?" Because it was like early in the morning and they're pounding on my door again. And it takes a lot now to get to my door. I have a long driveway, I have a gate, I have a lock. They snap my bolt open that has a no trespassing. It says back off government. It takes a lot to get to my door. I didn't used to have all that. I have it now. And he said to me, "You got yourself into this. You should have thought of that." I had some expletives, and I was not in a good mood that morning. I guess as he walked away, because I shut the door, maybe his colleague advised him that maybe wasn't the best thing to say, because 10 minutes later he came and knocked on the door again, and I opened it, and he said, "I just want to apologize for saying that. I should not have said that." So.
Well, government and unions seem to operate the same way. Intimidation tactics is basically it. Like you have, 7, 8, 10, 20 people there with uniforms and guns and needles.
Yeah.
And they just probably expect everybody to knuckle under. So I think it's great work you're both doing. It's tough. Tough. Win or lose, it has to be done. So thank you.
Tyler Lively, Queen's University. My question was answered two previous. I was going to ask about the constitutional challenge, but I guess I'll just make a comment that, echoing the last comment, that thank you for really bringing this forward and this sort of egregious conduct on behalf of the government. And I remember hearing a story of another group who had problems with the government in this province, and I don't know if you're still interested in theatrics at all, but I heard that a dead cow ended up on somebody's lawn. So.
Just saying, huh?
Yeah, of course. Stuff like that happens. Yeah, don't answer that. Yeah, that's. I'm not advocating anything. I thought it was.
I have a kind of general comment. I work professionally with the CFIA from another perspective on regulatory affairs, and maybe not to defend, maybe to explain. It's not a legal argument. It's simply of where I think part of this comes from. Is there's an incredible atmosphere, there's an incredible mindset among the Canadian public that whenever some
something goes wrong in the agriculture sector, there's a food poisoning outbreak, there's something happens that is not quite, where somebody gets ill, people have this bizarre idea that we have this incredibly unsafe food supply, and that people are dropping dead all the time because of terrible things happening with the food supply, which is complete rubbish. We have one of the safest food supplies in the world because of the technology we have, etc. But there's an incredible demand in the public whenever something goes wrong, that there has been somebody is at fault, somebody has screwed up, and government should do more. And there's incredible pressure, political pressure, on bureaucrats to do something. And this comes from you're not just dealing with the bureaucrats. The bureaucrats fundamentally, they're neither here nor there in terms of ideology. They just want to cover their ass. They just don't want to be accused, looking backwards, that they didn't do something that they should have known, even though they couldn't have known because nobody thought of it. It's like with the Maple Leaf thing, where nobody actually knew what was going wrong because everybody looked at the technology and was like, that went wrong? Like, it was a shock what went wrong. But somebody has to be at fault and somebody has to be responsible. And therefore there's this incredible political pressure from the public and the government on the regulator to do something. So one of the solutions to this, while I appreciate your legal struggle and I'm fully on your side in terms of like that you win, but I think the real struggle is the mindset among Canadians that somebody has to do something just because something went wrong, and the more law has to be done and there has to be new regulation to deal with this, and you put pressure on people who say, okay, fine, you want us to enforce, we're going to enforce. We're going to enforce, fine.
It is true. That's like the media narrative. Every time any of these food poisoning incidents happen, the media narrative tends to be that it was the government, or particularly the party in power at the time, that failed to do. But actually, I have another question. That was just a comment. Okay. Could you actually enumerate specifically some of the specific charges as well as the sorts of sentences that those respective charges can potentially carry? In this case, I know that you said there was significant jail time potentially associated with them.
12 years.
And I'm just interested in hearing some of the individual charges, what they are, because I'm assuming that they're going to sound kind of absurd.
Mostly they're disobeying an inspector and conspiring to. Oh, sorry. I always have to use this one too, right, to get it on some other track, right? Mostly they're disobeying an inspector and conspiring to disobey an inspector.
And there's several counts of each of those.
Okay.
There's another really bizarre one, which they call defrauding the public of services. And for a long time, I didn't understand what the heck they were getting at. And I'm still not sure that I do. But I think for strategic reasons, I just won't answer that at the moment. But it's something.
Is it something to do with making the CFIA work?
Something like that.
If you really narrow it down, that's how to define it. Yeah.
It's something like the CFIA had to put a lot of energy into prosecuting you, and therefore the public had to spend money at this, and therefore you've defrauded the public of the services, which of course she didn't want in the first place. I don't understand it.
That's a failure to enable bureaucratic expediency.
Yeah, I don't understand it, and maybe at some point it will be explained. But how are we doing for time?
Yep.
We can take another one.
You mentioned something about the Animal Health Act. I just wanted to hear about what exactly this act does and what kind of implication it has in this case.
Yeah, it's called the Health of Animals. Oh, sorry. It's called the Health of Animals Act. It's federal legislation, and among other things, it says that it makes certain diseases in animals reportable, and some of them you just have to file a report if you find out that any animal on your farm gets this particular disease. But some of them are much worse, anthrax and stuff like that. And not only do you have to file a report, but they will then come and quarantine your farm and kill your animals and so on. But the particular section under which they proceeded against Montana said that if they suspect, scrapie is a reportable disease, and I guess now, I don't know, I haven't looked at the legislation in a while, but if they even suspect that that there might be this, a diseased animal on your farm, then a whole slew of powers kick in. They can put you under quarantine and so on. The other, just, there were so many inconsistencies that we noticed along the way here. I started working with Montana about January of 2012, which was like a year and 4 months before the sheep disappeared. And during that time, we noticed a number of inconsistencies. But one of them was that even though her farm was quarantined, the meaning of quarantine was extremely, I think, unusual. That is, she couldn't allow sheep to come and go from her farm, and she couldn't allow sheep bedding and sheep manure to come and go from her farm, but anything else could come and go from her farm. So that somebody who had stepped in sheep bedding could still come and go from the farm. They're so concerned about the possibility of these prions being spread from farm to farm, at least so they say, but their own behavior is quite inconsistent with that. So, for instance, the vets, when they came and went from the farm, they would come and they would examine the sheep and walk around, in the barnyard where the sheep had been and among the sheep bedding and places where sheep manure might well have fallen. But when they left, they didn't, sanitize their boots or anything. So if they really are serious that scrapie can be spread by, through bedding and manure and stuff like their actions don't show that they really even believed what they were implementing.
And in that same vein, another huge inconsistency is they have a protocol for me to have the quarantine lifted. And basically it's just clean up the barn, put the manure in a compost heap, and use a bleach solution and power wash the walls up to 4 feet. And they have to be there and present and checking off and watch as all this is being done. But only in the barnyard. And I have a 100-acre property, and the sheep don't just live in the barn and the barnyard. They go to pasture. They go to this pasture. They live in the fields all summer long, and yet none of that is on this protocol. So I've asked them that. I said, well, how is it that, one could shed a prion over here and then, okay, we'll bleach it and antiseptic and it'll be fine. But they can leave the barnyard and shed one over there, but you don't care about that one? How come you don't care about that one? They have another 100 acres. And so they've yet to ask me to disinfect the 100 acres yet.
Which makes us think that it's, the whole thing is largely window dressing. They have to show that they've done something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dewald, who asked that question earlier about, you made the comment earlier that, it's the public that demands this. I agree with that. I mean, what do we do about the public mindset that says whenever anything goes wrong, we have to have the government do something and we have to have a new law, even though usually what has happened that they're complaining about is that someone broke an old law. There already was a law against this. Why do we need a new law against it? But anyhow.
Time for one more question.
I'm looking at a website called Scrapie Canada. It's not just the public. There are the Canadian Sheep Federation, the Canadian Sheep Breeders Association, the Canadian National Goat Federation. These people are not on your side. So
Yeah, because they read press releases from CFIA mostly. Okay, sorry.
anyway, that's just my comment.
No, go ahead.
One of the big organizations, there is definitely a different mindset among the large industry organizations versus the small farmers. One of the things that Montana used the word natural in her talk, and I know I've talked to some of the other people around here about natural doesn't necessarily mean good, but the difference between what Montana is raising, which is grass-fed sheep, and grain-fed sheep, which is what the large, Federation of Agriculture and there's goat and those people are raising, there's a difference in the quality of the meat. And that's one of the reasons I take a big interest in this. There's a difference in the quality of grass-fed meat and grain-fed meat, and it has to do with the ratio of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And there are some of us who, we're not locavores, we are qualivores. We want a certain quality of meat. We want our meat to have a high omega-3 fatty acid ratio, not omega-6. We want it to be grass-fed. We want a different product than what those guys, the large sheep industry organizations, are raising. They don't mind complying with the CFI regulations. They, they're raising a different product than what Montana and small breeders are raising. In fact, they'd probably be just as happy to see people who are raising grass-fed animals, go out of business. They don't. It's not something that they support. But the other thing that I just wanted to mention, though, is that the CFI makes it sound as though scrapie is a huge danger to these guys, and they do. Montana said issue press releases. They make it sound as though scrapie is a real, serious danger to sheep flocks. If you ask any person in Ontario what is the greatest danger to your flock, at least to people who raise their sheep out on pasture like Montana does, the greatest danger is coyotes. Scrapie is really far down the list. It's something that is not seen that often compared with even other illnesses. But scrapie takes time to incubate too, and the average incubation period I think is at least 2 years, and can be as long as I think they told us even up to 8 years, although 5 years is sort of normal. Those guys in the big feedlot farms and the industry organization or associations, they don't usually keep their sheep that long. They usually cull their sheep even before the effects of scrapie would be noticeable if they had scrapie. So, this is another way in which it's just a smokescreen and a make-work project for those guys, I'm convinced.
Is endemic in the deer population,
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly. It's yeah, that wasn't on the.
And a scientist, a CFIA, actually one of the scientists admitted it was impossible to eradicate, he said, and yet all of their press releases say that they're working hard to eradicate scrapie in Canada.
That's the Midwest project.
Yeah.
And then they blame it on international organizations. They say, well, the rest of the world is doing this, so we have to too, because otherwise the borders won't open. Well, the borders have been closed for years anyhow, and it didn't have much to do with scrapie being suspected on Montana's farm.
You've got 2 more questions. One there and one there. 3.
Sorry for occupying the question time, but there's another thing what you mentioned with the large organizations and the CFA. There's actually, I think for libertarians it should be interesting, there's a interesting symbiosis between government organizations and industry. It is much easier for government regulators to deal with a few large producers and a few large manufacturers than it is to deal with a plethora of wide ranges of different organizations, small organizations, because there's only so many resources they have to actually do what they are told they should do. Like all these inspection mandates are impossible to enforce if you have lots of little abattoirs everywhere, if you have lots of little sheep farmers everywhere. It's just impossible to do. Therefore, it is completely logical, if not necessarily intentional, to have regulations that make it more or less impossible for small operators to work within the system, because it simply makes the system workable. So that is the other reason. The more the Canadians demand regulation, the more they destroy the ability of small operators to actually work. And at the same time, Canadians whine about how there's only big corporations to doing this stuff, and that they can't get local food or whatever specialty food they have. So I think the real battle here is, again, it's about the mindset of Canadians who actually demand regulation. I mean, that is the one thing libertarians have to understand. The general public wants regulation. It makes them comfortable. That's what they understand. That is how they can think, because it's an easy solution to a complex problem that makes them sleep well. So you're not just fighting against the government. You're actually fighting against a simplistic, naive mindset among the general public. And that's a much harder battle to fight than the government.
Just in connection with that comment, something else that we noticed when the news came out about the difficulties Montana was having, I was contacted by someone who keeps the forum, the discussion group called Goats Canada, and all these goat keepers, because goats can get scrapey too. All these goat keepers were contacting me saying, you know, even though I joined a little local goat organization, I then found that my little local goat organization joined the big goat organization, and they joined the bigger goat organization, and all of a sudden I was being represented by the Federation of Goats or whatever, you know, goat keepers. And they didn't want to be. They didn't agree with a lot of the policies. So even though these large trade organizations claim to represent, you know, thousands of producers, how much do they really represent thousands of producers any more than, you know, how does my government represent me? Not really.
Thanks very much, Karen Montana.
Okay.